Beltway on Wednesday, December the 14th, 2022. Good morning to you. I hope you're getting to work. I look at a lot of the news across the country every morning. Blizzard conditions, severe weather are moving into the central United States. It's blasted through Oklahoma and Texas and Arkansas, and it's headed east. So please be careful out there if you're in one of my markets where it's just blustery and not very good. Just take your time getting to work, leave early, arrive late. Everybody understands. If you've got one of those terrible bosses who doesn't understand, they'll be late too. So don't worry about them beating you to the office. I begin by noting that the Wall Street Journal front page, well, first I'll start with the Washington Post front page, is about inflation dropping to 7.1% in November. That's good news. We like that. The Wall Street Journal has a story on Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump. That's interesting to me. And the New York Times, their number one story at the top of their landing page at this hour is Elon Musk shakes up Twitter's legal team as he looks to cut more costs. So news judgment is news judgment. Editors can put whatever they want that will attract their audience and build their audience at the top of their landing page. And so it has always been. That's why headlines exist. That's why newsboys 100 years ago, headline, read all about it. You've watched Newsies if you're of the right age, and you know about headline. I don't pick the headlines, for example, in my own column in the Washington Post. Headline writers are hired to attract attention, and the people who run platforms for news, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, their platforms are designed to draw attention to what they think will keep people there. There are big three platforms in the United States, so the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Those are the three that are going to last and last and last and last. My friends at the LA Times say, don't forget us. And well, I'm sorry, you're not playing in the same league as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. And Wall Street Journal is fair and balanced. Washington Post tries to be New York Times, a left-wing organization. So Wall Street Journal today knows that its readers are primarily serious people who are going to work and they can afford a little bit more for their subscription, and they tend to be center right. This is basically the Wall Street Journal readers' radio show. Right, serious people who go to work and want to know what's going on in the world. Their lead story this morning, the one that jumps out at you, it's actually on the top in the middle. Ron DeSantis holds early lead over Donald Trump among GOP primary voters, Wall Street Journal poll shows. Now, in today's grand old pod, which is only available to subscribers of the universe, and I'm putting a few free ones over at highly concentrated Hugh, has the AP poll, which shows pretty much the same thing. But the Wall Street Journal poll turned out to be a pretty good poll this year, and they've been working at it for a long time. So they've been, the election's a month ago, and now 2024 has begun. The 2024 presidential election is 23 months away, and it's begun. And it's never not going to be this way. So the Wall Street Journal beats every major polling organization to the street. The USA Today poll that I'll be talking about in the grand old pod also went into the field very quickly and also found that DeSantis had a lead over Trump. But here is the Wall Street Journal story. Republican primary voters have high interest in Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as a potential 2024 presidential nominee and view him more favorably than they do former President Trump. In a hypothetical contest between the two, Mr. DeSantis beats Mr. Trump 52 to 38% among the likely GOP primary voters contemplating a race in which the first nomination votes will be cast in just over a year. The poll found that Mr. DeSantis is both well-known and well-liked among Republicans who say they are likely to vote in a party primary or nominating contest, with 86% viewing Florida governor favorably, compared with only 74% who hold a favorable view of Mr. Trump. But the fact is that three-quarters of Republican voters view Donald Trump favorably. I talked to some Republicans yesterday inside the Beltway, and I said, look, he's still the best interview in America. He's going to run, and the only way I see him not running, the only way I don't see is if he takes an Agnew deal, the Agnew option. If the charges pile up against him and he gets indicted by this new scary-looking prosecutor who's still over in Denmark or at The Hague or someplace, I don't know where, in Netherlands, Jack Smith, I think his name is, if he indicts Donald Trump, and the New York Attorney General indicts Donald Trump, and the Georgia grand jury indicts Donald Trump, maybe all the prosecutors get in the room and offer him the Agnew deal. In October of 1973, Spiro Agnew had been caught out. He'd been reelected as Vice President of the United States with Nixon in a landslide, but then federal prosecutors found that Spiro Agnew had been taking money, and was still taking money, from contractors in Maryland from the time he was governor. I got to ask Larry Hogan if that's all cleaned up now. It's been 50 years. And they came to him and said, we don't want you to be the vice president. We don't want to prosecute a sitting vice president, but we will. And we will run the risk of doing so. Would you rather give us a no-low plea and be sentenced to some community service and a fine and resign the vice presidency, or would you rather be prosecuted? And Agnew thought about it. He said, I'll take the plea, handed in his resignation. Last time I saw Spiro Agnew was at Richard Nixon's state funeral in Yorba Linda in 1994. And I know he's dead now, but he vanished. He became a ghost. I don't know how he was in line to become the president of the United States, and he vanished. He became a ghost because he did not want to deal with federal prosecutors. And I told these Republicans I was talking to, the only way I see Donald Trump not running is if he takes the Agnew option. It just becomes too much of a pain in the neck to deal with all these people. He says, get them all into a room, prepare a document. I want to be absolved of all problems. I want everyone who's ever been associated with me to be absolved of legal problems. I want Ivanka and Jared to stop being pursued by madmen. I want Don Jr. to stop being pursued by Leticia up in New York. And I'm going to take the deal. And I'm not going to run for president, and I'll play golf. I'm 75 years old. I'm president. I've got my Secret Service. I roll where I want to roll, and I can still fill an auditorium. And I'm going to pick the next president. You're going to reign, not rule. You're going to be the sovereign of the Republican Party. That's the only way. The Agnew option is the only way I see the former president not running. But I do look at these polls, and I find that when you're only polling Republicans, and Ron DeSantis is ahead. I'll talk about the AP poll in the Grand Old Pod today, and I'll talk more about this. And by all means, go and listen to the highly concentrated Hugh today. But if you want the Grand Old Pod every day, you're going to have to subscribe to the universe. I might give you the Grand Old Pod today. But that's the Wall Street Journal. Now I go over to the New York Times. What is the front page in the New York Times? Is it SBF being arrested? Big story. I'm going to do it in the rundown, which is going to take 3 segments today because there's so much news. No, not SBF being arrested in the Bahamas. Is it inflation down? No. Do they have a poll too? No. Their number one story at the New York Times at this hour is Musk shapes up Twitter's legal team as he looks to cut more costs. Subhead, Twitter has stopped paying rent on offices and is considering not paying severance packages to former employees, among other measures. It reads, over the past 2 weeks, Elon Musk has shaken up Twitter's legal department, disbanded a council that advised the social media company on safety issues, and is continuing to take on drastic steps to cut costs. Mr. Musk appears to be gearing up for legal battles at Twitter, which he purchased in October for $44 million, according to 7 people familiar with internal conversations. Again, ask yourself, this is the front page of the New York Times. Is Elon Musk living inside their head or what? This is a private company. I thought it was still public for one more reporting period to the end of Q4, but I've been told as soon as he took the company public, he doesn't have to report anything anymore. It's his company. It's his toy. He can do with it whatever. If he wants to run it in the ground and the people who lend him money lose all their money, he's not going to do that, by the way. I think it's very, very healthy. Mr. Musk appears to be gearing up for legal battles at Twitter, according to 7 people familiar with internal conversations. He and his team have revamped Twitter's legal department and pushed out one of his closest advisors in the process. They have also instructed the employees not to pay vendors in anticipation of potential litigation. To cut costs, Twitter has not paid rent for its San Francisco headquarters or any of its global offices for weeks, 3 people close to the company said. Twitter has also refused to pay a $197,000 bill for private charter flights made the week of Mr. Musk's takeover, according to a copy of a lawsuit filed in the New Hampshire District Court and obtained by the New York Times. Twitter's leaders have also discussed the consequences of denying severance payments to thousands of people who have been laid off since the takeover, 2 people familiar with the talks have said. And Mr. Musk has threatened employees with lawsuits if they talk to the media and act in a manner contrary to the company's interest. The aggressive move signaled that Mr. Musk is still slashing expenditures. They go on to say his takeover has been characterized by chaos, a series of resignations, reversals of the platform, previous suspensions, rules, capricious decisions. It's characterized by Elon Musk. Now, I wrote in the Washington Post yesterday, they picked the headline, opinion. I defended Twitter to other conservatives. I was wrong. I talk about the old Twitter and the new Twitter. The old Twitter promised us it was a fair and open, completely level playing field. It isn't. It wasn't. It maybe become that. They're getting rid of the policies that shadow ban people. I mean, I was shocked. Then I was angry. Now I'm outraged at old Twitter. But the New York Times is concerned about new Twitter. The number one story, really? The number one story in the United States is Elon Musk has fired the old legal team that gave so much bad legal advice to the old Twitter executives. He is living rent-free inside of the heads of every New York Times executive because he's going to take over the news. That's the real story. More on that after the break. Stay tuned. It's Wednesday, December 13th. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. Boy, am I looking forward to getting to California. It is 28 degrees in the Beltway this morning. And I lived in California from 1989 to 2016. And I was a Buckeye before that, and my blood has thinned out. I was a Californian for so long that I became not even able to be a Virginian. This isn't really cold by Ohio standards, but it's cold by California standards. So I'm going to California soon, right after Christmas. I got to deal with Genghis Kate at Christmas, and she's going to be very excited about Santa Claus, of course, so she'll be bouncing off the walls when we're gone. But I am going to be looking forward to being out of this. To the rest of you, I'm going to do a real rundown of the news. I just couldn't believe the New York Times this morning. Elon Musk. I'll come back to that next segment. Blizzard conditions, severe weather move across the United States. Massive storm triggers blizzard and tornadoes across central states. The coast-to-coast storm dumped 6 feet of snow in the Sierras when it began. It's going to bring heavy snow to the Northeast. You folks up there in the Northeast, it's coming your way later this week. And in between, it's just giving us the rest of the misery. Big winter storm. That's great. U.S. consumer price inflation eased more than expected in November. That's good news, all right, down to 7.1% last month from 7.7% in October. Keep raising those rates. The Fed will announce probably a half-point interest rate today and then maybe 3/4 of a point one more time or a half point 3 more times, whatever. They've got to get rid of it. It's painful. Been here, done that before. Then you can get to normal. And normal is usually a prime around 4%. And a 10-year around 4.5%, and we'll cover the market in the next segment. President Biden expressed hope that inflation will normalize by late next year. They've been wrong about everything about inflation for 2 years, so I'm not going to believe that. In the House and the Senate, they don't have a deal on spending. And Leader McConnell has raised the pressure as government funding talks churn on, as has Leader McCarthy. They've said they're just not going to sign on to this additional bump in spending. Democrats have spent so much money in 2 years, and they seem to believe, inflation fell to 7.1%. It's fine. Let's spend some more money. No, you can't throw more fuel on the fire when the fire is finally dying down. You don't start it again. So McConnell's taking a hard line. Both House and Republicans and Senate Republicans want to raise defense spending by about 10%. That is important. But they cannot, non-defense discretionary spending the states haven't even spent all the money they've got. It just can't keep going on. Sam Bankman-Fried arrested and put into cuffs yesterday right before he testified. What a coincidence. Many people are commenting on this. This is, I'm not prone to conspiracy theories, but Sam Bankman-Fried, who did a podcast last week, did a virtual conference last week, has been saying guilty, guilty, guilty for a long time and saying stupid things. Put him under oath and he lies. That's a bunch more counts of things to bring in Sam Bankman-Fried. Prosecutors stopped him probably to save Democrats from hearing speculation. Democrats did not want him to testify under oath where he had to talk about his connection to the Democratic Party. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. He didn't testify. We did get the new head of FTX telling us that it was a nightmare there and that he is looking into whether or not the parents, FTX CEO, confirms he is investigating Bankman-Fried's politically connected progressive parents. Testifying before the House Financial Services Committee on Tuesday morning, the newly appointed CEO of FTX revealed that he is investigating the roles that the disgraced founder Sam Bankman-Fried's parents were playing in the cryptocurrencies exchange recent implosion. CEO John Ray was asked by Republican Representative Bill Huizenga whether Bankman-Fried's parents, both of whom are professors at Stanford Law School, had advised their son had been employed by the firm in any capacity. We indicated that Mr. Bankman had given legal advice. He received payments. The family certainly received payments, Ray testified, adding that we are investigating the role the pair played in fraudulent businesses. Maybe I'll be getting an invitation to be a visiting professor of law at Stanford. They might have a couple of vacancies pretty soon. I get those occasionally, and I normally don't go anywhere but Chapman, but maybe Stanford would be fun for a semester. Prosecutors say FTX was engaged in a massive year-long fraud. The SEC's head of enforcement, that's prosecutors, the people that had him arrested. The SEC said FTX provisions for customers were simply bogus. Sam Bankman-Fried used FTX for, quote, old-fashioned embezzlement. Live updates. Bankman-Fried charged in one of the biggest financial frauds in U.S. history. Non-Bankman-Fried news. The rundown continues after this. Stay with us. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I am thinking about Stanford Law School these days. As Christmas descends upon, law school exams are probably still underway. They get out of there in a couple of weeks. At least that's the Chapman Law School schedule. And I'm not teaching, I'm teaching next semester, not this semester. And I'm thinking about how small law faculties really are. There are 50, 60 people that go to everybody. And you choose to either be very close with them or you keep your distance. And I've been out of town so much, I've kept my distance. I know people, because I've been there since 1996. I know almost everyone. But the people who came in the last year and a half when I haven't been there, I won't know when I show up in January. And I'll make the rounds, introduce myself, and they'll drop by it's a very social group. There's a floor of faculty or two floor of faculty, and they know everyone. Sometimes law school faculty become friends, not just colleagues, and they entertain each other. And when I was a young law professor, I did that and had some very good friends at the law school and saw them occasionally. And Ron Rotunda died, and I gave the memorial address for him, things like that. And we would go out with the Rotundas and have a good time with them, but not in recent years. And so I'm wondering about the Sam Bankman-Fried parents, both law professors at Stanford. They helped him. They were deeply enmeshed in the company, according to the new CEO, took over in bankruptcy. One of them, the mom, is a Democratic activist. They're both law professors. The dad teaches tax. I'm not sure what the mom teaches. And you just have to wonder whether or not a billionaire son, and I didn't know anything about SBF until this all came crashing down because I don't care about crypto. I don't follow crypto. It's not my deal. So if you've got a billionaire parent down the hallway, do you know them? My parents used to know the Chief Justice's parents when the Chief Justice's parents lived in Warren for a while. His dad was running a steel mill, but they only knew him a little bit, and they didn't pal around with him, but they knew him a little bit. And I'm wondering if the parents were close enough friends at the law school with other law professors that other law professors at Stanford and indeed at the wider campus and in the Palo Alto community did not. It's a weird place up there. Silicon Valley's wealth has done weird things to Stanford and weird things to the local ecosystem and weird things to social relationships in church. I knew Monsignor Otolini, who was the priest up there. We talked a few times. He did his best to minister to the people of Palo Alto, but you put that much money in one place and it becomes the Hamptons. It becomes what's that show about the rise and fall of the billionaire on television with the family that's based very loosely on the Murdochs. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe Billionaire. I'm not sure. It's a weird thing. And the collapse of it, Succession. That's it, Succession. If we had the guy who covered the O.J. funeral, the dapper author, whose name I can't remember right now, who wrote Once Upon a Time in a City Far Away about the O.J. He had to fictionalize the O.J. thing because it was just so wild. That kind of an author, I know Michael Lewis is on the factual side of it, but someone needs to go to Palo Alto and figure out the novel here. And this is just so wild. At the same time, an hour down the road in San Francisco, Elon Musk, the barbarian, has come over the wall and is looting Rome, Twitter. And the New York Times is melting down, as is the left. And conservatives are saying, wait a minute, Twitter was supposed to be this level playing field. I have used the term a stadium for the persuadable when I talk about the Washington Post's opinion section. It is, in my view, the best place for the stadium for the persuadable. They've got some conservatives, they've got some liberals, they've got some hard left, they've got some pretty conservative people, but not hard right. They've got crazy people. And they got a lot of people in the middle, and they got a lot of expertise, and it's the stadium of the persuadable. The persuadable go to the Washington Post and they read what's over there in the opinion section. They read pretty good straight up news because the editors there are pretty old news people. They're liberal. They're liberal overall. I mean, if you take, I doubt there are many Trump voters at the Washington Post, but they're not crazy like the New York Times. And Palo Alto is even crazier than the New York Times. And San Francisco, of course, has gotten so nuts that Peter Thiel left, and a lot of people are leaving. They're getting out of California because it's becoming too expensive to live there. But I'm just thinking, okay, this is all speculation. What if the parents became big-time academic celebrities inside of Palo Alto, and they had billions, and their son was giving them billions, which is probably embezzled money, and they got a pad in the Bahamas, and they're trying to get away quietly. They don't want to bring down their son. They figure out something's wrong. He's a tax professor, after all. They're not a securities and corporations professor. They don't understand the SEC laws and things like that. I would never give anyone advice on the forms and the compliance with SEC laws, because publicly traded companies are difficult things to run. People who sit on the audit committee of publicly traded companies, God bless you, that's a nightmare. So I just think that there's a story within the story within the story, which is the social implications within the Palo Alto community writ large, and the Stanford community a little bit smaller, and the law school community the smallest, that must be breathtaking in the earthquake aftershocks that are happening. Back to the rundown. Another startup. WeWork once had robust cash reserves. Those have dwindled, raising chances of default. WeWork is trying to turn a profit before its once formidable cash reserves run out. The Federal Reserve's efforts to fight inflation have made that harder. This is in the Wall Street Journal. WeWork is saddled with long-term expensive leases and more than $3 billion of debt. All right, WeWork is failing. WeWork is a nightmare. Get out of WeWork. And that's just all of it. We did this before with the dot-com bust in 1990. If you invest in data, invest in Amazon or Palantir. They've actually got the data. Don't invest in shared workspaces. It's just a replay of the early 90s and the dot-com bust, the late 90s and the dot-com bust. And it's been 25 years, so we're doing it again. People get stupid with their money. Not if you listen to the Hugh Hewitt show, and it's coming through. But it's not as bad in Palo Alto as it is in China, where Omicron is spreading so fast. Beijing isn't in lockdown, but it feels like it, reports Keith Bradshaw and David Pearson of the Beijing Bureau. You can't find anyone. People aren't going out. Why? Because Omicron, the butcher's bill is going to be paid in China. It got paid in the United States. It's a new variant. Their vaccines suck. They were terrible. They weren't close to being Pfizer or Moderna or even J&J quality, and J&J wasn't up to the other two. They haven't got boosters. It's just a nightmare in China right now. And I'm almost done with the rundown, which took 3 segments today. Ukraine escalates attack in a gateway city, heading at the war's next frontier. Ukraine is stepping up efforts, from the New York Times again. They do the best foreign news, by the way. Efforts to isolate and degrade Russian forces in and around Melitopol, a city in a region that had figured prominently in any Ukrainian offensive to drive Russian forces from southern Ukraine. Kyiv has been using long-range precision missile strikes, sabotage missiles, targeted assassinations to put pressure on the city. Officials in both countries acknowledge that recent attacks on Russian command centers, ammunition depots, supply routes in Melitopol, whose pre-war population was about 150,000, has increased. The aftermath of some attacks have been captured on video, shared on social media by Russian soldiers. It's hell for the Russian soldier. That whole thing could collapse. The Telegraph in Great Britain reports Russia forced to retreat near Kherson, where Russian retreats turn into Russian routes. It's not the war of 1812 when they purposely withdraw back to Moscow and then burn Moscow down. It's not defense in depth in World War II. Here the Russians advance, and the Russians are the papier-mâché army, and it's raining, it's snowing. And then I just want to cover 2 more stories. 3, actually. Scientists achieved nuclear fusion breakthrough with the blast of 192 lasers. As one of the Republicans I was talking to yesterday told me, that's a great thing. It's going to be decades before it becomes fission. We got to go out, and they didn't say this, I'm saying that. We have to build nuclear plants in the United States, and we have to export Nuke 5.0, the nuclear technology, which is safe, affordable, and non-proliferation oriented, to the third world, because China's doing it. They're eating our lunch. We have better machines. We have safer machines. We should be giving it away to the third world. And the research is in. Facebook mom groups stress women out. Social media mom groups can be a lifeline for first-time mothers, but they can turn ugly fast. And it goes on to talk about new research from Pepperdine University. Hey, Pete Peterson, you guys are doing great work. confirms what science many of us have already experienced or suspected. The longer women spend on mom-focused social media sites, the higher their stress levels. That's because they think everyone's doing everything right and their kids don't fall down the stairs and their kids don't get fevers and those kids recover quickly and those kids are taking violin lessons. Don't go there. Don't go there. Just talk to your neighbors. Everyone's got a normal experience with kids. It's hard. It's exhausting. Finally, I want to close with this story on the rundown. I may pick it up on the, if you stay tuned and you listen to Grand Old Pod, you'll hear me talk at length about this. Ron DeSantis calls for a grand jury investigation of COVID vaccines. Bravo. Elon, do you know, Ron DeSantis, not Elon Musk, Ron DeSantis is going to do to the CDC what Georgia prosecutors have done to Donald Trump and everyone on his team. They're going to have a state grand jury, and they're going to look into whether any crimes under Florida law occurred in the way that the vaccines were developed and rolled out, the promises made, the information suppressed. Tony Fauci is going to be in front of a grand jury in Florida, just like Lindsey Graham is in front of a grand jury in Georgia. And you say, how can that happen? Again, it's a playbook. When the Democrats invent a rule, Republicans are going to use that rule. When Harry Reid broke the filibuster for judges, he broke it for Republicans led by Mitch McConnell, who saved the Constitution by holding open the Scalia seat and then having it filled with Donald Trump's 3 nominees and the Republican Senate confirming Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and Justice Neil Gorsuch. So that's a playbook. Harry Reid invented the playbook. The Republicans used it. Georgia has invented a playbook where they're going to, an Atlanta prosecutor convenes a grand jury to look into the election of 2020 and whether or not Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham and all these other people need to be indicted on Georgia law. Ron DeSantis has said, that's a pretty good playbook. Florida Governor DeSantis is calling for a grand jury investigation into alleged crimes and wrongdoing related to the COVID-19 vaccines and is setting up Florida's own Public Health Integrity Committee. The governor's office announced what it called aggressive action Thursday after DeSantis held a roundtable discussion with physicians, researchers, and victims of adverse events from mRNA vaccines. Quote, the federal government, medical associations, and other experts have created an expectation that receiving a COVID-19 vaccine is an ethical or civic duty and that choosing not to get vaccinated against COVID-19 is selfish and harmful to others, DeSantis' petition for a grand jury reads. It goes on to say that it is impossible to imagine that so many influential individuals came to this view on their own and that pro-vaccine individuals and companies created these perceptions for financial gain. Heads up, Moderna, Pfizer, J&J. Heads up, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins. Heads up, everyone. Ron DeSantis is going to get a grand jury to do to you what Georgia is doing to our friends in the world of election 2020, what New York has done to the Trump organization. Once you break the rule book, you break the rule book. Once you break the glass and pull the alarm, grand juries are useful to investigate stuff. Everybody does it. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I am wearing my Packers hat because I lost a bet about the Packers and the Browns Christmas game last year. Just thought I'd remember that because the Packers are so awful that their best week of the year was the bye week, which they just had. Congressman Mike Gallagher, who lives in Green Bay, joins me now. Good morning, Congressman.
Hugh, you have never looked better than you look in this moment right now.
It's harsh for me, but I figured since the Packers are almost as bad as the Browns, I would celebrate with you dysfunction in a franchise. You've got a dysfunctional franchise. That. Yeah, that's it. That's terrible. You got a dysfunctional franchise, but you got yourself a committee since last we talked. Kevin McCarthy has named you as the chair of the Select Committee on China, which he will set up as speaker in January. What else do we know about this?
We know that Speaker-elect McCarthy wants it to be a serious effort. China and restoring fiscal sanity are his 2 top priorities. He wants it to be a bipartisan effort. And notably, when he stood up the China task force under Mike McCall's leadership, and Mike McCall did a great job, and in many ways, I'll just be building upon the foundation that he laid with the China task force. McCarthy reached out to the Democrats to get them to participate. Initially, Speaker Pelosi was going to let them participate, but then they backed out for political reasons. So we're trying to avoid that from happening again. We want Hakeem Jeffries, the new leader on the Democratic side, to take this seriously, to appoint serious, sober members. We believe firmly that if our foreign policy is built on a bipartisan foundation, if we can come together and identify where Democrats and Republicans agree, or at least in some areas where we agree when it comes to facing the greatest threat of our generation, that our foreign policy will be stronger. So again, my hope is that the other side takes it seriously, but Speaker McCarthy is going to prioritize this effort. And so right now I'm just building the team.
A.B. Culverhouse, former White House counsel, former ambassador to Australia, sent me an article last week about ITAR. And I'd never known about this before, but apparently we give the Aussies a hard time about getting our most advanced technology. And he said, this is nuts. In that article, it said very bluntly that China is engaged in the greatest naval buildup in history. And I put that on Twitter because that really puts it blunt. I've never heard it put that way by Jerry Hendricks, by me, by Mark Vandross, by Robert O'Brien, by you, by a lot of people who are interested in the Navy. They are building the biggest Navy in history. Do you think Americans know that?
No, and I think one of the key components or key lines of effort for the Select Committee on China is going to be taking these conversations on China that tend to exist in think tanks or in obscure newsletters and getting them into the living rooms of Midwestern American families, or getting your average American family to understand why they need to care about the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party. You mentioned ITAR, one of my favorite subjects, international trafficking in arms regulation, right? So I've been chair of the Friends of Australia caucus for the last 6 years with Joe Courtney, a Democrat from Connecticut. And this is the biggest thing we've heard consistently from our Australian allies. We've formally incorporated Australia into our national technology industrial base. We've now incorporated them into the AUKUS agreement. They are a Five Eyes partner, meaning we share sensitive intelligence with them. And yet, when it comes to sharing key technology, ITAR is still a roadblock. So one of the things I think we need to do in this Congress, both on the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the Select Committee on China, is figure out a way to create what I call an AUKUS exemption for ITARs. We should be going above and beyond to collaborate more closely when it comes to technology with the Aussies and the Brits. We cannot selectively decouple our economy from China if we do not simultaneously further intertwine our economy with our closest allies. So ITAR is an obscure thing, but it's absolutely critical geopolitically when it comes to competing with China.
I'm about to make my first on-air suggestion to the new Select Committee on China. It's a very complicated suggestion. I want you to listen very closely. I'll go slow for the Packers fans and the Steelers fans out there. I want you to station a layman member of the committee staff, someone who doesn't really know what's going on, in the back. And you've been watching the World Cup. They have yellow cards and red cards, right?
I have not been watching the World Cup.
They have yellow cards and red cards. Neither do I, but I know a yellow card's a warning and a red card is a penalty. And that person is going to be a fairly smart, ordinary American who's watching it on TV, and they're going to have a yellow card and a red card. And anytime you say something like AUKUS, they're going to put up the red card. And anytime you say something like Five Eyes and follow it up with that's intelligence sharing, they're going to put up a red card. Because you kind of explained what Five Eyes is, but you didn't. So we're going to give you a warning about the Five Eyes reference. Nobody knows what that is except you and me, Gallagher. And AUKUS, nobody knows what that is. Now, we talked about ITAR, and you just explained it, so I'm not going to throw the flag on you. But that staffer is going to be in the back of the room, and they're just going to have yellow card, red card. When you fall into this acronym and phraseology, would you explain what the Five Eyes means?
Well, quickly, when I was a freshman member of Congress, we did a retreat for all the new members at Harvard, and Graham Allison gave a presentation, and he said that the Pentagon has acronymphomania, which is like a fetishization of acronyms. So perhaps one of the rules for the Select Committee on China will be that our hearings are an acronym-free zone. We aim to create a jargon and acronym-free zone, and we're going to implement a fatwa against acronyms in all of our committee work. So I quite like that suggestion. So Five Eyes is an intelligence sharing partnership between America and our closest allies, the Australians, the Brits, the Canadians, and the Kiwis, the New Zealanders. And so
don't use Kiwi. You're going to lose the Steelers fans if you use Kiwi. They're not Kiwi. What are we doing talking to the fruit? Yeah, they won't even that. You got to slow down.
The Lord of the Rings people. I'll put it in.
That's it.
I can understand. Yeah. But basically, these are close. If you think about our alliance structure as a series of concentric circles, I would argue that the Five Eyes partnership is really the inner ring. In some ways, closer than NATO partnership, which is a far bigger
Yes.
arrangement with countries that we're not quite as culturally aligned with at times. I would argue that Five Eyes is the beating heart of the free world. So we should be looking for a lot of opportunities to enhance that Five Eyes partnerships when it comes to technology sharing, economic partnerships, and the Aussies in particular. I mean, the Aussies have been the canary in the coal mine for Chinese aggression. They made their shift politically in terms of recognizing the threat posed by the CCP and making key legislative changes far before we did. In many cases, some of the changes we made were ideas that we stole from the Aussies in terms of trying to get at, for example, People's Liberation Army, China's military. See, I didn't do the acronym there. I'm learning slowly.
Wait, you didn't.
Yeah.
You said Five Eyes.
That's right. Okay.
We've got people who are listening who are thinking in their. Is that like 5 A's, 5 O's, 5 U's? Is it like the Raffi song? I like apples and bananas. It's 5 EYES, 5 eyes, 5 sets of eyes on the same intelligence. That's how you do it, Chairman.
Indeed. I'm
going to be your truth-telling. Go ahead.
My only point is that there is more we can be doing to cooperate even more closely with our closest allies, the Aussies in particular. When it comes to advanced technology that we need for long-range missiles that we'd want to station on U.S. territory in the Pacific, as well as Australian territory in the Pacific, so we can do to the Chinese what they've done to us, which is field a rocket force to keep our ships really away, far outside the weapons engagement zone for Taiwan. There's a lot we can be doing to tackle the China challenge in concert with our closest allies in the region. I just believe that we need to attack it with a sense of urgency.
We brought down the yellow card because you explained 5 eyes, EYES. But we got the red card up because you didn't tell us what AUKUS is. And you just blew through AUKUS like everybody. That's not going to be known by anybody. So AUKUS, why don't you tell us what AUKUS is?
Everybody on the committee, members and staff, is going to go to the Hewitt Media Communications Boot Camp. That's my first rule as chairman. So we can talk like normal human beings, not like Beltway bandits seduced by acronyms and jargon. AUKUS, this is a relatively new agreement between the Australians, the U.S., and the United Kingdom, where the crown jewel of this agreement is that us, America and the Brits, are going to share our nuclear submarine technology with the Australians. And this was a massive shift because the Aussies were planning on buying diesel submarines from the French. And they said, you know what, that's not what we need, actually, for our own security. We need nuclear submarine technology, very sensitive technology. So that's the crown jewel of it. But in addition to that, it creates a framework where we can share other technology with the Aussies and the Brits. I sort of view it as a additional layer on a part of the Five Eyes arrangement. And it really creates enormous opportunities, for example, to share intermediate range missile technology with the Australians. And I actually give the Biden administration credit for cementing the AUKUS agreement. I would say there's wide bipartisan support with the AUKUS agreement. Now, the challenge is already we're hearing from some in the Navy that they are not equipped to start working with the Aussies to help them build submarines because our shipbuilding industrial base is so challenged right now. So because we haven't gotten a shipbuilding plan that makes sense for years, we haven't set the demand signal for the shipbuilding industry to start expanding their facilities. So because of our own ineptitude when it comes to not being able to build a bigger Navy, we're screwing up the promise of. Am I allowed to use the acronym after I've explained it? What are the rules?
Yes, you are. Once you've explained it, well, and we go back, like I haven't thrown up a card because of ITAR. You explained it at the beginning. I didn't know what ITAR was. When I got this article from AB, that's not an acronym, those are initials. I said, what the heck is ITAR? Is ITAR really screwing up our ability to bring Australia fully into the alliance with the UK and the United States on nuclear submarine technology?
I think if you ask any Australian official, and you know who you should have on your program is a good friend of mine named Andrew Hastie, who's the shadow defense minister, young guy, special forces veteran, multiple combat tours, really smart, exciting guy. I believe he'll be the defense minister one day. He understands this issue probably better than anyone in Australia right now. If you ask him, if you ask people even on the other side of the island in Australia, they say ITAR is a massive, massive roadblock for U.S.-Australia cooperation. That's something I think we can get fixed. In the past, people have tried and they've failed, but Joe Courtney and I want to take a run at it, Hugh, so that's something we're going to be pursuing over the next 2 years.
And if the Select Committee on China holds a hearing on it, it will change. Congressman Mike Gallagher, I'm going to call you Mr. Chairman now. Mr. Chairman.
Wow, this is very exciting.
Mr. Chairman, I got a hat here. Would you like to buy this hat for a couple of bucks? Because otherwise, I'm going to go to the Goodwill.
I want it back at some point, Hugh. I want it back.
No, I'm going to keep that hat. Don't go anywhere, America. Congressman Gallagher, now Chairman Gallagher. Not yet. Not yet, Chairman. You're going to be Chairman in January of the Select Committee on China. It's a big deal. It's a morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway on this Wednesday, December the 12th. The first guest in this, my third hour, is Ronna McDaniel. She is chairwoman of the Republican National Committee. Good morning, Ronna. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Hugh. Always good to be with you.
Madam Chair, have you got the votes to get reelected?
I do. I have the votes. I've got 2/3 of the committee that support me, and obviously I'm going to continue to talk to those members, look at things that we can do differently and better, improve on the things that we're already doing well, and talk to every other member and hope to earn their vote as well.
You know, it won't surprise my audience. I think that's great news. I've endorsed Ronna a long time ago. I think she's done a great job for 4 years. We keep winning more seats in the House, and that's what I want to keep doing. Candidate quality matters. Leader McConnell said the obvious to everyone, candidate quality matters, but we can't change everything up in the middle of this. And so when does that vote happen, Chairwoman McDaniel?
It happens at the end of January in California.
Okay. And so there just is, that's in California?
Yes, it is.
Well, I'll be in California then. I might come. Where are you doing that? Down in San Diego or up in San Francisco? I won't go north, but I'll go south.
In Newport area.
Oh. Well, you know what?
Yes.
I live in Orange County, so you may see the radio station set up over there, but it'll be 3 to 6 in the morning, and I don't think anyone's actually going to want to come and talk to me between 3 and 6 in the morning.
Well, I will. Anytime.
Thank you. Let me go now to the announcement that the Democrats made about changing their primary calendar to begin in South Carolina. It's my understanding the New Hampshire Constitution obliges New Hampshire to go first, and that therefore we're going to go first in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, they're going to go. Well, Iowa is our first caucus, and then New Hampshire is going to be the first primary. Our calendar stays the same. But New Hampshire, it is required that they're first. So I don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to have primaries in December or October? I don't know what the Democrats are thinking. But the RNC, the Republican Party, our primary calendar is set. It's Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina.
And my belief, Madam Chair, is that this was done by Joe Biden, Team Biden over at the DNC in order to give him a layup in his first primary rather than go to New Hampshire and get rejected by the Granite State voters. What's your thought on what they're up to?
Yeah, I think President Biden has a heavy hand in it, which is understandable, being the president and asking his party to do his bidding. So South Carolina was critical. Remember Jim Clyburn coming in and supporting Biden, which really essentially got him the nomination. So I think it's rewarding his friend, putting South Carolina first. And they're looking to put Michigan or another state in those first 4 contests as well. And they're completely eliminating Iowa, which, by the way, Hugh, they didn't announce before the election because they didn't want Iowa mad at them. But we swept Iowa anyway, and we won a House seat there by retiring Cindy Axne and electing Zach Nutt.
I say we didn't have a red wave. We had a series of red thunderstorms and a series of red flash floods in Iowa and Ohio and Florida and in New York, and that was enough to get us the House. And North Carolina. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, what I always say is look at the popular vote. We turned out 3.5 more million voters. If the popular vote had stood for this election, we actually would have won the presidency. New York Times did an article on this yesterday.
Oh.
But in every single state, there was a Republican that won statewide. Arizona, for example, the top vote getter is a Republican, Kimberly Yee. So if one Republican is winning statewide, it's not a turnout issue. We've got to figure out what that sweet spot is that brought independents to that Republican and Republicans to that Republican, and maybe not to other Republicans.
I've known Treasurer Yee for a long time, and Treasurer-elect Yee. She's wonderful. She's terrific.
She's great.
She's great, and will be a face of the party going forward. Let me now ask you about our own calendar. We know when the primaries begin, Iowa, New Hampshire, as you said, and New Hampshire will move up, and I think Iowa will probably move up if that's the case. And we did this once before, I think in 2012 or 2008. But I want to ask you, when are you going to get the candidates together? Because we're going to have a lot of candidates. Not only the former president who was declared, but we've got Asa Hutchinson who's in the race. I expect others to get in. When are you going to start bringing them together? Because in my view, you know this, the earlier the better for everyone, because we can get small dollar donors to start pitching in if WinRed or the RNC or the Senate Majority Fund or someone sponsors these debates or forums, people will watch. They'll get 20 million people.
So right now we're looking at either July or August of 2023 to have the first debate, and we'll be passing those rules or the parameters for that first debate in our January meeting. And usually the first debate's in the host city of the convention, which is going to be Milwaukee, and that's when we're looking to start. And it doesn't seem that far away, does it? I mean, it's amazing.
Oh, it's not.
Quickly. It's not far away.
Let me lobby you to start earlier in Milwaukee, because it's just leaving money on the table and voters out of the conversation. The earlier you start, the more people come and give because they're excited about the contest.
But do you think they'll all be in by then, Hugh? I mean, I see a lot of candidates. I don't know who's going to get in, but I think there's a lot that are going to wait till May or June.
I think they'll get in depending on when you set the debates, not the other way around. I think they're going to say, I'm not going to miss it. Now, talk to me about who gets to be on the stage. I wrote a column. It didn't make it past the Post's editorial writer. They just didn't think it was good enough to Inside Baseball. But I said, we really need the counterpart to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. They don't give participation trophies. They rank the people in a meeting of 13 smart people, and they say, this is the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 team, and they get to play in the playoffs. And the Ohio State University Buckeyes are in there, thank God. And the number 5 team, whatever it is, Alabama is not in, and that's too bad.
And University of Michigan's also in there too, just as a nod.
We weren't going to mention that team up north. We were not going to mention that team up north.
I had to do it.
So they're in. So that's a ranking by experts, not a poll, nothing like that. How are you going to pick who gets on the main stage, and will you limit it? Because I've already heard from people who say, I'm going to run for president. What do you think? And I think to myself, that's nuts, but they want to make money off of being on the stage.
Yeah, some of them are running for, cabinet positions or top roles, right? So, listen, but we also want to make sure the voters get to see a lot of the candidates too. So it's that. We're going to have some criteria. I'm not going to get ahead of the debate committee. Dave Bossie has been running our debate committee. He's done a great job. We've been meeting regularly, but there will be criteria, probably fundraising criteria as well as polling criteria, and we're going to limit what polls we use. We've already been looking at the polls that have been just so wrong that we're going to eliminate from any of our polling criteria. But I think the first stage will be big, and we may have 2 debates. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be, because we don't want to limit the voters' choice, and that's what we're thinking about right now. But we also don't want to have everybody on the stage. You have to pass some criteria.
Well, that's a clue. 2 debates. You mean like back-to-back debates and then scramble the order of people showing up? You're not going to put people at the kiddies' table.
I'm not going to give you any more clues because I don't.
I like that. I heard 2 debates. I heard that.
Yeah, but send us your. They wouldn't be back-to-back. I think we do them on different nights so they get the same time slot. But if you have any other suggestions, send it our way, because the debate committee is continuing to meet right now.
I think you're doing great work on this. Talk to us. Let's close by talking about the state parties. My old friend Tom Fuentes, who went to be with the Lord a long time ago, ran the Orange County Republican Party in a great fashion. So did Scott Baugh, came up a little bit short. So did their successor, and I love them all. But you need state party chairs. California's got a good one, but it's a blue state. How is your state party chair recruitment going?
Yeah, it's really different in every state, because some of them get elected at a convention of 10,000 delegates. So the RNC doesn't really have a say in the state party chairs. What I do is a grow program where we are incentivizing state parties to become functioning state parties that actually build a small dollar fundraising platform, that actually have criteria. We go in, we create metrics for them, and then they get incentivized with RNC investment when they meet those benchmarks that are state specific. This is something I instituted. It's really helped grow our state parties. It's the first time the RNC has invested in all 50 state parties and territories, And we have to continue to do that. Listen, the party is decentralized. I keep hearing people talk about decentralizing. That's strong state parties and strong county parties on top of the community centers that the RNC is putting out. But the stronger they are, the stronger the party is overall.
This is why you don't change chairs when you're winning. And Chairwoman McDaniel, is this the argument you're making to the 1/3 that haven't committed to yet? Look, what are you, nuts? We're doing good stuff.
I brought a lot of changes. Listen, we got out of the Commission of Presidential Debates. This is a first for the party. When Red has been launched under my tenure, the voter registration efforts we did were critical this cycle in North Carolina and Florida and Iowa. And on top of the community centers, where the first time the party has invested in Black, Asian, Hispanic communities in a long-term effort. And we saw the fruits of that with candidates like Monica De La Cruz, helping Michelle Steele. I mean, the list goes on and on. I just don't think you change an infrastructure. A lot of people who are calling for change don't understand what the RNC does. We put candidates in a position to win, and we build the road that all the cars drive on. But you need good candidates to get to the destination and good consultants. I'm going to talk about that, too. We're going to create a best practices for our candidates so they understand not to pay a consultant 18% of their TV buy or pay a ridiculous SMS texting rate. Because a lot of our candidates were first-time candidates this cycle and didn't know that.
Oh, boy, that is well and truly necessary, and that's why Ronna McDaniel should be reelected chairwoman of the RNC. Thank you, Ronna, and
Thank
go
you.
Bucks. We'll see. I hope they have a rematch.
Go Blue.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Adam, for playing the carols I like. It is a great year for school choice. Doug Ducey in Arizona has now lead the country in pathways forged by West Virginia and by Florida, and pretty soon Ohio, and I believe Iowa will pass Arizona model complete school choice. This upsets Democrats a great deal, and Senator Bill Cassidy is leading the effort to make sure they don't screw it up in the Senate by crazy stuff coming out of the Department of Education. Senator Cassidy from Louisiana joins me now. Good morning, Senator. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Hugh. How are you, man?
I am great. Good to have you back. You ran into my producer on the airplane. He said, "Why don't you come on?" And you said, "Why don't you invite me?" So I said, "Get him on." And boy, is it timely. I've got a Washington Post little blurb today on why I'm hopeful for 2023. It's all about school choice. And evidently, the Department of Education has started a parents' council. That scares me. Tell us about it, Senator.
Yeah, well, they started a parent council. You should have called it a council of high-end donors to the Biden administration who oppose school choice.
I knew that would happen. They will wreck any good idea. So what are you going to do about it? What does the Senate do about it?
Well, first, just to get some color to it, the Department of Education did a National Parents and Family Engagement Council. Now, wouldn't that be good? I mean, a national council, people who are kind of concerned about things, but instead they stacked it with people who oppose school choice, who basically were far left. And you think I'm joking, but 11 of the 14 organizations on the council had donated to Biden or to Democrats in general or to other entities with Democrats. And like one of them was supported critical race theory, had defended a letter calling parents domestic terrorists.
Do they have any school choice advocates on it at all?
As best as I could see, they did not. So we sent a letter to them saying, this is absurd. You can't do this. This is like, it's like an Onion article. It's a total satire. And so they disbanded it, actually. So I think disbanding it is much better than having it in the form that they decided to have it.
I wonder if they even followed the Federal Advisory Committee Act, because, you can't just throw these committees together and then stack them. That's a subversion of government. You need some committees, but you can't do it. What do you think about school choice prospects in the United States? I'm very encouraged, Senator Cassidy. I look at Arizona, I look at Iowa, Ohio, I look back at Florida and West Virginia. I'm very encouraged.
I am also encouraged, and I actually call it parental choice. Why don't we give the parents the power to choose the school, the setting that's best for their child's unique needs? Which if you have money, you can do it. If you have money, you pay tuition. And I think what's driving this is the parents' awareness out of COVID that when the public schools shut down, but the private and parochial and some charters remained open, they should have a choice to send their child to a school which is open.
I think you're
then
right.
when they saw their kids on Zoom getting all this crazy stuff that was being taught to them, they said, well, wait a second, I thought I could trust the educational establishment. Now I know they're indoctrinating my child.
Yeah. I had the superintendent of the Boston Catholic schools, I believe his name is Tom Carroll, on a couple of weeks ago, because I cover school choice a lot, and the parochial schools are having a renaissance. What has happened in Louisiana? I know that the school system there, which was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina, has kind of rebuilt in an unusual way. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it in the middle?
That's good. After Katrina, when effectively the entire school system was destroyed, but frankly, probably, the old joke, and it's kind of, I don't want to believe me. I still tear up talking about Katrina hitting my state. But the old joke about Texas A&M, where a tornado hit Texas A&M's campus and did $1 million worth of improvements.
I've never heard that. That's a Louisiana, Texas joke, isn't it?
Well, A&M's kind of they troll us constantly. We LSU, so we occasionally troll back. But it hit the school system in New Orleans, and in a sense did a lot of improvement because it destroyed something which was being in the words of one commentator, there for the interest of the unions, but not for the interest of the students. It's been replaced with school choice. Essentially, almost 95% of the schools are school choice, and the ones that are left that are public would be like a magnet or a charter school. A magnet or a gifted and talented school. And so now, do all the charter schools do well? No, they don't, and they get closed down if they don't. But it still has given the parent the power. And whereas under the previous system, if a school did poorly, it got propped up. Now, if a school does poorly, it gets shut down. That system has been expanded across our state. So you can be in Shreveport, and you have options for school choice. There's a public system, but you also have the option for the charter school, and the charter school and the public schools live side by side.
Now, I got to tell you, Senator Cassidy, I only hear about Louisiana when LSU is beating up on Alabama or vice versa. I don't know much about Louisiana. But I do know Florida, West Virginia, and Arizona are in the school choice leadership. I gather Louisiana is too. Are parents happy with it?
Yeah, parents are happy with it. Let me give you one, and in full disclosure, my wife is my daughter has dyslexia. And my wife, who's a powerhouse, has helped founded now 2 schools and working on 2 more that are charter schools for children with dyslexia. Now, 20% of the population, 20% of the people listening are dyslexic. So if you have a chance to send your child to a school with a science-based curriculum, which is going to teach your child how to read, so instead of being ridiculed in front of other children at a regular school, when she stands up and she stumbles over words in 3rd grade that she should have known in 1st grade, instead she's going to an environment where they're supporting her, teaching her how to read so she achieves her potential, and then she mainstreams back into another school in high school. That's something parents want.
Yeah, Senator, I've never had on a parent of a dyslexic child before, and I want to pause on here because I know some, and it's a different learning system. Woodrow Wilson was dyslexic, so you can become a PhD from Princeton and you can become president of the United States if you have dyslexia, but you got to recognize and work with it. He memorized the way words looked. That's what his system was. How do people teach dyslexia? I know there's a special school in California where I used to live where kids go and they teach to the dyslexia, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so, boy, you ought to get my wife on because she's the one who can give it. She's collaborated with a couple, Dr. and Dr. Shaywitz out of Yale School of Medicine, who literally wrote the book on dyslexia, as in, dyslexia, the Dr. and Dr. Shaywitz. But what you would do in that is you teach the child how to break down a word. And so if you think about cat, you and I say cat. When my wife says cat, she goes cat, ta, cat, ta. And you teach the child how to break down the words. There's some of it which is, sight words that you would memorize. And that's how people who go into special, Charles Schwab, I think, has said that he is dyslexic publicly. And the guy's a genius. But he knows his vocabulary within finance in a way that it doesn't stop him. and similarly, other really bright people have publicly said that they are dyslexic. So it's not related to IQ. You can be incredibly bright and dyslexic. And in fact, when you said this is the first time you've had the parent of a dyslexic, that's probably not true. It's just the first time that someone has said their child is dyslexic.
You're absolutely right. Because I've had thousands of guests. So you're saying 20% of kids have got dyslexia. I've had thousands of guests, but we haven't talked about it before. And I know from my personal experience, the school makes all the difference in the world if the dyslexic child is surrounded by an environment that knows he or she is dyslexic and teaches to that special need.
Yes, and if you look at the kind of, again, imagine a fourth grader standing up and he can't read. And he is humiliated when he literally cannot read. Now, he goes home, he struggles, the parents recognize he's bright, but he comes home depressed. Instead, you go to a school which acknowledges, which diagnoses, which gives you the treatment, and you begin to see progress.
You know, that's what I learned when I read the biography of Woodrow Wilson. And I don't admire Wilson for much, but as a young man, you know, he struggled in school and no one understood what it was. And that guy became, you know, the PhD, the president of Princeton, all that different stuff. Very smart, very wrong, but very smart. And I'm just glad to hear that now that there are school choices, and that's what will happen if school choice spreads, is that the schools will adapt to the need, not the students to the school.
Yes, we're conservatives. We think that market forces deliver better products. This is a market force recognizing a pent-up educational need and adapting to the need, as you put it, instead of asking the child to adapt to a one-size-fits-all system.
So to square the circle, did the now defunct Biden Parents Advisory Council that is no more, did they have a seat at the table for dyslexia organizations, or were they shut out?
They were shut out. Right now, so far, I think I'm pretty sure so far the kind of educational establishment opposes charter schools in general and would oppose something in particular for dyslexics, which is just a disservice to 20% of the children who learn differently.
You know, I want to close. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in a very public match with Randy Weingarten because he is against teachers' unions. And I just see him. I say, keep going. That is the most important thing. Was the Randy Weingarten types? Was her organization on this now defunct council?
I can't give you I can't tell you if they were in particular, but if they weren't, their fellow travelers were. Yeah.
Well, Senator Cassidy, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Thank you for talking to Dwayne. Most people won't talk to Dwayne on an airplane, so you're very generous. You know, he scares them. And so I appreciate you joining us. Have a Merry Christmas down in Louisiana. Sorry you didn't make the Final Four this year, but it's Ohio State's year, Senator, so it wouldn't have mattered. You would have gotten beat by us anyway.
I think it's Georgia all the way, but that's just the SEC bias.
We will see you on December 31st. Merry Christmas, Senator. Thank you for joining me.
Merry Christmas.
Welcome to the Grand Old Pod. I am so glad you were with us. Want to remind you, the Grand Old Pod is only available at the Universe. I am putting it for a few days on the, attaching it to, start it over again, second. Dwayne, the other computer is disconnected.
Which are you talking about, the call screener?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can go fix that.
Yeah, it creates a funny a block on seeing myself, so I can't broadcast into it. I got rid of that, but you can go reconnect it while I'm... All right, do it again. But they couldn't stop Jack or the waters. Welcome to the Grand Old Pod. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. For a few days, I'm putting the Grand Old Pod at the end of Highly Concentrated Hugh. It's available by subscribers only at Universe.com if you're a subscriber to the Universe. And it's content I don't do on the radio show because I don't have time on the radio show to do anything besides the news, take calls, do the breaking news and occurs throughout a morning drive show. But there are a couple of things I like to focus on the Grand Old Pod that I want to go back to. I would encourage you to listen to the opening segment of the Universe, of the Highly Concentrated Hugh today, because it's the first segment that I had on the show, and it talked about Elon Musk in my column in the Washington Post. The New York Times is melting down over Elon Musk. Their front page on this Wednesday morning as Musk shakes up Twitter's legal team as he looks to cut more costs. That's the front page on the landing page on the New York Times. As I said this morning on the show, it's hard to imagine that's really the most important story in the world. They just hate. They're melting down about Elon Musk at the wonderful gray old lady. And it's because they hate him so much because he took away their toy. Twitter was a toy of the left, and they took away the toy. I want to begin with the grand old pod by noting that Leader McConnell said yesterday afternoon, McConnell again faults candidate quality for GOP midterm losses. He didn't do it again. I want to say we have lost repeatedly in 2010, 2012, and 2022 Senate races that we ought to have won. Sometimes we lose Senate races where you had a great candidate. Adam Laxalt was a great candidate in Nevada, a great candidate. We lost because there is a ghost in the Harry Reid machine. It's a union town. It was very close. And I hope Adam stays in the game because he's a great candidate. That's not candidate quality. Candidate quality is Dr. Oz in Philadelphia mispronouncing the name of the market and doing Twitter feeds and not being funded. It's Herschel Walker in Georgia, unable to get funding and not able to duel with Raphael Warnock, who is the most eloquent of people. Candidate quality did hurt us, but we didn't lose Missouri because we didn't nominate Eric Greitens, and Eric Greitens would have lost that seat. But so McConnell's just repeating the obvious. I hope they play in the primaries. I hope the Republican Senatorial Committee plays in the primaries in the next cycle. I've never believed that, but every 10 years we learn our lesson, and the map is very, very favorable to Republicans in 2024 in the Senate. Ohio and Montana and in West Virginia and some other places, Pennsylvania. There's some other places where we ought to have great candidates, and I hope that the Republican Party gets involved in picking them so that we don't have the judicial nominees. We got the House. We won. I mean, it wasn't a disaster. It was more like winning a game 8-9 where you scored all your 8 runs in the first inning, and then you got a 9th inning 1 run. So you won one, that was Florida, which was red. Speaking of Florida, on the grand old pod, GOP prefers DeSantis by double digits. Most want Trump out of 2024 poll. This is from the Daily Caller News Foundation. A new poll shows Republican Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida with a wide lead over former President Donald Trump in 2024 Republican presidential primary, with most Republicans and Republican-leading independents not wanting to run Trump again, a departure from other polls. Around 56% of Republicans and Republican-leaning voters selected DeSantis as their top pick. That's a lot of people. While just 33% preferred Trump, which, according to USA Today, which sponsored the poll conducted by Suffolk University. The 23% lead is the widest deficit that Trump has seen in recent polls. Additionally, 61% of Republicans and Republican-leading voters stated they want somebody other than Trump to run for the nomination, while just 31% said they wanted him to run. It's from Suffolk's Political Research Center. I'm going to keep my eye on the poll. I don't think that's going to deter former President Trump, who has already declared, but it might encourage other people to get in. Which brings me to story number 2 on the Grand Old Pod. Will Greg Abbott run for president? This comes from KUT.org in Texas. After a decisive re-election win, you might expect to see Governor Greg Abbott gearing up to run for president in 2024, like Rick Perry and George W. Bush before him. For the past 4 decades, there's almost always been a Texas Republican vying for the highest political office, and I think there will be again. I've said on the Grand Old Pod before, Ted Cruz is going. It's going to take a while to go. He's going to go. This season, however, it's the Christmas season, Donald Trump's re-election campaign is having a discouraging effect on would-be Republican candidates. This is just not good reporting. No, it's not. To discuss the odds of Greg Abbott presidential run, the Texas Standard was joined by Joshua Blank, the Director of Research for the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas. Listen to the story above or read the transcript below. And this political scientist goes on to say, I think most of the Republican Party leaders see themselves as potential presidential candidates. Look, the reality is that Abbott would certainly make a strong presidential contender. He's a Republican governor from one of the largest states in the country. He's a prolific fundraiser. The main issue for Republican voters and Republican primary voters is immigration and border security. Not the only issue, it's one of them. He's the governor of a state that shares a 1,200-mile border with Mexico. For these reasons, Abbott is always considered a national figure. So I think the obvious answer would be Senator Ted Cruz ran the last time against Donald Trump and lasted the longest among other competitors. Cruz has obviously been a lot more careful this time around about expressing interest in seeing what the former president is ultimately going to end up doing. But I think right now he seems to be the Texan most likely to be on the 2024 Republican primary ballot between him and Abbott. Now, political science professors, there are 100,000 of them. They are not all created equal. I don't know this one. Maybe he really understands politics. Maybe he doesn't. But I don't think Greg Abbott is going to allow Ted Cruz to decide what he wants to do. I think Greg Abbott can be governor of Texas as long as he wants to be governor of Texas, and he'll decide when and if he wants to be president, and we'll find out about it. But I don't take your eye off of him, because a political sciences professor said Ted Cruz was almost certainly is going to run. GOP pod. The grand old pod wants you to understand that the mainstream media does not understand the grand old party. And I do, and that's why you're listening to this. Next story. Former Vice President, this comes from WFIN.com in New Hampshire. Bedford, New Hampshire. Exclusive. Former Vice President Mike Pence says the positive response he highlights he received from his new autobiography has been, quote, very encouraging as he weighs launching a bid for the White House in 2024. The fact that people are now getting to know me and my family, our faith, our conservative convictions better has been a great source of encouragement as we think about the way forward and what our calling might be in the future. Pence emphasized in a national exclusive interview with Fox News. Pence spoke at the Tuesday at the nationwide book tour, brought him to New Hampshire, the state that has held the century's first primary race for the White House. I got asked yesterday by a senior Republican, what happens if Georgia does go first among the Democrats? And I said they can't go first among the Democrats. And that's because it's in the New Hampshire state constitution that whenever the first primary is held, they're going to go 2 weeks before that. So they can move the Georgia primary up to December of this year, of 2023, a year from now, and New Hampshire will hold their primary for both parties 2 weeks before it. So the idea that Georgia gets to go first is just Joe Biden's attempt to take what is not going to be a very wildly met with enthusiasm announcement of intent to run for re-election and give himself a home game in South Carolina. South Carolina. South Carolina is not going to get to go first. New Hampshire is going to go first. And so we might be talking to presidential candidates in November and October, and I'm sure we're going to be talking to them in September when the Hugh cruise is underway, probably from the boat. Generalissimo, I don't know if you are ready to connect up on the Hugh cruise, which is over at HughHewitt.com. We're going to go have to find presidential candidates when we're at sea on the Hugh cruise. Are you ready for that?
There shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we can either do it by the candidates by Skype, and they should be able to Skype you from the boat, or it should be doable.
I hope so. We will find out. I go back to the grand old pot. Bipartisan coalition pushes House plan for legal weed, but Senate not fired up. This is in New Hampshire again. So New Hampshire, the live free or die state, hasn't come to grips with legalized marijuana yet, and that's going to cause most of the candidates running for president to have to confront the issue, because New Hampshire always talks about what worries New Hampshire. The new Virginia task force announced for temporary detention order mental health care crisis. Glenn Youngkin has been out talking about the state's so-called red flag law. An overhaul may be coming to Virginia's temporary detention order, TDO crisis, with a new task force announced by the governor. Governor Glenn Youngkin announced a major initiative, the Prompt Placement TDO Task Force, on Tuesday. The task force is expected to bring together government agencies, public and private hospitals, law enforcement, and other community partners to address the crisis facing people with TDOs, and that's the temporary detention order, who are waiting for behavioral health services. Virginia's current TDO process is bad for patients, care providers, families, and law enforcement who wait with these patients for placement, said Secretary of Health and Human Resources John Littell in a release. The task force is a key step in improving the behavioral health system across the Commonwealth. Now, do you know why Governor Youngkin did this? They had another terrible shooting in Virginia. Remember the University of Virginia shooting where the student shot 3 other students on the bus? That's a TDO. There is no place to put people where they ought to go if they have a mental health crisis. And Republican candidates and the Republican Party has to come to grip with red flag laws are very popular, but not if they don't work. They didn't work recently in Colorado, they didn't work recently. In Virginia, they didn't work recently. Wherever you see a shooting of the Walmart shooting in Virginia Beach, where a disturbed person that's been known to be disturbed for a long time finally snaps and goes in and kills a bunch of people that for whatever reason the voices in his head, it's usually his, tell him he has to do. And you can identify those people, but if you don't take care of them and put them into treatment, rapid placements, for example, releasing police officers from spending significant hours away from patrolling the streets, they got to get them into care. And Glenn Youngkin has figured out this matters to a lot of people. Nobody in either party wants people who are disabled and mentally at war with their own minds on the streets. They want them treated. It's different from chronic homelessness, different from people who have already sort of lost the ability to connect reality. They're not usually armed, but people who have broken and need to be admitted and put on the medication that they need and given the treatment that they need. Youngkin is ahead of everybody else on that. I expect other states to follow, both Republican and Democrat. Certainly Republicans who want to avoid the gun issue ought to be stressing the mental health issue, because the gun issue is actually secondary to the mental health issue. The people who shoot up crowds of strangers or even people that they hate are mental health issues that get guns, not guns that go find sick people. It works that way, and Republicans are going to run for president announcing that, and Glenn Youngkin knows. Got to follow basically the Doug Ducey model down in Arizona. Governor DeSantis was in the news yesterday. He has called for a grand jury investigation of COVID vaccines. I want to read this story to you from the Hill. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling for a grand jury investigation into alleged crimes and wrongdoing related to COVID-19 vaccines and setting up Florida's own Public Health Integrity Committee. The governor's office announced what it called, quote, aggressive action Tuesday after DeSantis held a roundtable discussion with physicians, researchers, and victims of adverse reactions from mRNA vaccines. The federal government, medical associations, other experts have been created an expectation that receiving a COVID-19 vaccine is an ethical or civic duty, and that choosing not to get vaccinated against COVID-19 is selfish and harmful to others. DeSantis' petition for a grand jury investigation reads. The petition also alleges that it's impossible to imagine that so many influential individuals came to this view on their own, and the pro-vaccine individuals and companies created these perceptions for financial gain. The governor, DeSantis, is creating the Public Health Integrity Committee because he distrusts the CDC. This is brilliant. This is brilliant because it cabins the fears and it will provide the answers that the Fauci-Collins team suppressed. And not just the Fauci-Collins team, but the Keystone cops who are running HHS now under Becerra in Washington, D.C. DeSantis knows this matters. We want to know what to believe and what not to believe, and we want to know that the CDC is running a fair game. So this is also turnabout as fair play. You know how Georgia has impaneled a grand jury to investigate interference with the 2020 election? DeSantis has taken that playbook and saying, okay, so we're going to create a state grand jury and we're going to look into a federal operation. I get it. And that's exactly what Georgia is doing as they go after Lindsey Graham, Donald Trump, everyone involved with the recount in Georgia in 2020. DeSantis say, okay, two parties can play this game. We're going to have a grand jury on the CDC. I think this is fabulous. I talked about it on the radio show this morning. Go for it, Governor DeSantis. Finally, Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson says Trump is the worst choice for the GOP in 2024. Now, the launch of Asa Hutchinson's, we haven't had him on yet. I want to get him on pretty soon. He's considering running for president. He called a third Donald Trump White House bid the worst scenario for Republicans and said his call for terminating parts of the Constitution Trump's hurts the country. In an interview with the AP, so Hutchinson is doing whatever he can to get his trial balloon above the horizon. I'll have him on the show in the next couple of weeks or maybe in January on the radio show, not the podcast. The Grand Old Podcast is not for interviews. It's just for a rapid run through the news. I'll have him on. But Hutchinson is 72. All right, this is the key thing I want to emphasize to people. If you aren't for Trump, you're not for a 72-year-old former governor of Arkansas. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I think it's got a feel of George Pataki about it. Now, I am open to being persuaded that Asa Hutchinson could be the Jimmy Carter. Now, remember, Jimmy Carter came out of nowhere in the Iowa primary in 1976 by being the small state Southern Democrat who went up to Iowa and knocked on doors. And then we got to remember 1992, because Mario Cuomo didn't run, we had our Will Cuomo won, Will Cuomo won, won't Cuomo run. Try saying that 10 times. And Mario Cuomo kept everyone dangling, and then he didn't go file his papers in New Hampshire. And in Iowa, Jimmy Carter was just patiently knocking on doors in 1976. Hi, I'm Jimmy. I'm from Georgia, and I'm running for president, and I want to restore this country's integrity. And he was a nice guy. He still is a nice guy. I hope he's listening. I'm sure that the former president listens to everything about presidential races. He can talk about and tell Roslyn, who must be going a little bit crazy by this point about hearing about how he and Ham Jordan and Jody Powell won in 1976. But they all go to Iowa, and they're a small state Southern governor, and then Bill Clinton did the same thing, and that's memorably recreated by John Travolta in the role in Primary Colors. And if you haven't watched Primary Colors, I really recommend it. It's something that Grand Old Pod listeners should be listening to. But Asa Hutchinson, back to this AP story. He's part of the growing cohort of Republicans eyeing a White House run at the challenging moment for the party. Hutchinson said, "That's the really worst scenario." He's referring to Trump and Biden running against each other. "That's almost the scenario that Biden wishes for." That's exactly the scenario that Biden wishes for. And that's probably how he got elected the first time. It became, a binary choice for the American people between the challenges that we saw in the Trump presidency, particularly in the closing days, versus Biden, who made it that choice. "It hurts our country," he said. "I mean, any leader, any former president that says suspend the Constitution is tearing at the fabric of our democracy. And so we want to make sure that the people know that it's Republicans that support the rule of law." Hutchinson said he's measuring how much financial support he'd have mounting a presidential bid, and he said he's testing to see what kind of a response his message is getting as he weighs a run. Hutchinson's been a regular presence on Sunday news talk shows. Okay, this is how I'm going to conclude today's Grand Old Pod. The Sunday shows are fine. They're nice. They're interesting. They don't matter in the Republican Party. The Grand Old Party and the Grand Old Pod does not play video and audio from the Sunday shows because they used to matter, and now they get 2 to 3. On the best weekend combined, they get 6 million people across the 4 Sunday shows. Fox News Sunday, Meet the Press, Face the Nation, and ABC This Week. I don't think This Week with Jake Tapper gets any viewers. They might. Maybe they get 250,000. I don't know. Those are the same people who live inside the Beltway. They're the consulting class. They're people like me, news junkies. We read them. We listen. They do not move Iowa and New Hampshire needle. People in Iowa and New Hampshire, believe it or not, go to church on Sunday morning. The Sunday shows is not a place to test your message. Here's how you test your message. Get out to Iowa, go up to New Hampshire, and hold a meeting and see if you can fill a room. This is the way to do it. And by the way, they're veteran discerners of whether or not they're going to. South Carolina, too. Florida, too. Now, it's a funny map because if you start thinking about it, in 2024, Iowa's going to be a jump ball. But it's not going to be a jump ball in New Hampshire if Chris Sununu is running. That one's put away in Chris Sununu's category. It's not going to be a jump ball in South Carolina if Nikki Haley is running. Put that one away in Nikki Haley's court. Not going to be a jump ball until Ron DeSantis is running in Florida because Ron DeSantis is running. Now, if Ron DeSantis wins Iowa, despite there being 25 candidates and 20 debates, and he goes and he beats Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, and he beats Nikki Haley in South Carolina, and then he wins Florida going away, it's over. But if there's a scrambled egg after Florida, it comes down to Super Tuesday. And you remember the old Giuliani strategy? I'm going to wait till Florida. I'm not going to spend any money. It didn't work for Giuliani in the year, what year was that? 2016? 2012? I don't know. What year did Giuliani run? I can't even remember. 2008? Maybe it was 2008 when John Voight was on the bus with him. Yeah, it was 2008. And John McCain ended up winning. everyone thought Rudy said, I'm not going to play in the Iowa game. I'm not going to play in the New Hampshire game. I'm just going to go to Florida. It didn't work. It was over by then, right? It was down to McCain and Romney by Florida, and that got out to California in March, and McCain beat Romney there, and Romney won in 2012, but he didn't win in 2008. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know what's going to happen in 2024 because of the plethora of candidates, the only Trump voters. They're only going to vote for Donald Trump, or they're not going to show up at the primary. They're not going to show up at the caucuses. They're just not going to show up. The home court advantage in New Hampshire, the home court advantage in South Carolina, the home court advantage in Florida. It is absolutely a game. Toss the game, begin the game, toss up the ball, and go for it. Game on. It's a scrum. It's a rugby game. You use any metaphor you want. And Donald Trump does not appear to be holding back the waters. I don't think Ron DeSantis is going to. I mean, Asa Hutchinson is so far back and so inconceivable at 72 years old that he's doing the George Pataki, giving it the old college try, and he's not been removed from office so long that it's not, credible. I mean, I'll have him on the show soon. We'll go find Asa Hutchinson, have the governor on. But it is not probable. It is not probable. I will tell you what I think as we go through the grand old pod, but every single day, there's a short version of it. Normally it goes 45 minutes to 50 minutes, but it's not today. I'm putting at the end of the highly concentrated Hugh, which is for free. It's the show, a couple of interviews from the show, the monologue from the show, the rundown from the show. That's highly concentrated Hugh. That's for free. It's ad-supported. It's over at iTunes and Spotify. This is subscription-supported. It's only available through, most days, it's only available through the universe. Today it is also available as part of the Highly Concentrated Hugh podcast, because I'm letting people know that it's out there. That podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh, gets thousands and thousands of listeners. I've just started this, so I've got to get people to subscribe. But we're not going to give it away very often, very, very rarely, in fact. I just want to let people know, go to the universe. If you join the universe, you get every radio show without commercials, all of it. That's not Highly Concentrated Hugh. I have to do that. Could I do this for the Steelers fans? The radio show is 3 hours long and it's got ads. It's a traditional radio show. Highly Concentrated Hugh is between 30 and 45 minutes, and it has ads, but it doesn't have the ads you heard on the radio show. It's got different ads, but not that many. One at the beginning, one in the middle, one at the end. And then the Grand Old Pod has no ads and a lot of Dwayne. And that's kind of sad that we talk to Dwayne a lot, but I haven't figured out yet who's going to do the Grand Old Pod with me other than Dwayne, because people don't want to get up as early as I do the Grand Old Pod, so we can push it out the door. But I do hope that for Christmas you'll go subscribe to the universe, listen to the show wherever you go, all of it without ads. It's it's close to 2 hours long without ads and no news breaks, no weather, no sports, that kind of stuff. We make it just the Hugh Hewitt Show, and many of you have been listening for 23 years. I want to close by saying thank you to Mary, who I met yesterday, who has been listening to my show beginning in Colorado Springs in the year 2000 and is now listening to it in Washington, D.C. every single day on our Beltway affiliate. I really appreciate listeners like that. That concludes today's Grand Old Pod. Thank you for listening.